Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theatre, and we're so fortunate today to be joined by the fantastic Felix Mallard, currently starring in the Netflix series Ginny in Georgia. And the first thing that I was curious about were some of the conversations that you had with Deborah Fisher, who's the showrunner of it, when you first got the scripts. Kind of like, what were some of the useful questions that were in place for you to ask her and talk to her about with this character? Because so much of the show and your character in particular is about the unexpected elements which lay beneath the surface with all of them.
Absolutely. And that was sort of the first question is, because I'd only read the pilot when I first got it. And the first question was, where is this going to go? And what are we doing with this character? Because if you look at episode 1, Marcus, he's very, very different to episode 10, Marcus. And I like that journey, and I'm really proud that we got to tell that story. I mean, initially I was quite reticent to play that kind of antagonist kind of character, at least in the beginning. And part of my questions and my first few questions were, okay, what is this setting up? How are we telling the story? Why is he behaving in this awful way? And where is it going? And I'm so thrilled with where they decided to go with it, because I've read it and I go, oh man, he's mean. He's not cool. And then my second thought was, I know so many guys like this. I just can count on the top of my hands, just go, okay, yeah, I get it. He's real. And then the final thing, when I kind of learnt where it was going, was just to be able to show that journey and to be able to show that, so show young men that your behavior has repercussions. You should treat women with respect, and what happens when you don't. And the point where Marcus kind of realizes how he's been treating Ginny is really seriously affecting her, I think is an important message for young men to look at and to sort of look at their own behavior and provide an example of what not to do.
Mm-hmm. And so much of what he's going through, and part of what drives a lot of his behavior, is the fact that his closest friend in high school got really sick with cancer and passed away, and we learned that very on in the show. And did you have lots of conversations to really flesh out the idea of what was that friendship, what was that relationship, and what was it that he was really going through? Because it wasn't a journey of something that happened to him over the course of a few weeks. This is something that he was living with every day with his friend for well over a year, and is still kind of processing the grief and trauma that he's been experiencing since then.
Absolutely. And it wasn't necessarily more about building up what that relationship was, because that's all they're wonderful circumstances to have. But what the story about is about that grief, and it's about overcoming it or not overcoming it, and how people deal with that, especially young men, because a lot of young men just get the emotion and we push it down and we try and just not feel anything, and that's normal. So I think to show that process of grief was really important, and to talk about that. We had discussions with both Deb and Sarah about has Marcus gone to therapy? Where is he at this sort of stage? And we kind of came to the conclusion, and we also worked with Mental Health America on this. We came to the conclusion that he's been through therapy. He's taken medication. He knows the rigmarole of mental health, and can become later on in the story an advocate for it. He's one of the what I love about Marcus is he's one of the few people who, amongst all the masks that he's throwing up and the dishonesty and how many fronts he's putting up, he is quite often quite honest about how badly he's feeling. He's always like, yeah, I mean, this is my life. So to have that and to be honest, and for him to be an advocate for Ginny, was a really special and an honor to kind of play, because you need that messaging of, it's okay to go through these things. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay to ask for help. You can't do it alone.
Right. Yeah, and we see a lot of emotional intellect in him, particularly as the season progresses, maybe not very much so at the beginning, and the fact that he really sees elements of himself in what Ginny's going through, and he's the only person that really cottons on to the fact that she's also not okay, and that she's putting up a lot of walls as well. Did you look at the construction of the character in Ginny and the way that character was coming into his life, and really look for what those similarities were going to be between the two of you?
Yeah, for Marcus, it's all about Ginny. That's all he cares about. As soon as she comes into his life, it's, oh, I'm just going to be in your life. That's it now. There's no question, there's no doubt. It's whatever capacity, I'm going to be in your life. And as he gets to know her, you're right. He sees a lot of himself in her, and he sees, for him, she's the only thing that makes sense. He can't sit still unless he's around her. He can't focus unless he's around her. And it's because they have such a kindred connection, and because they can share those feelings. And it's messy, and it's not the right thing, to do quite often, especially with the love triangle kind of going on. But it's love. It's the only thing that makes sense to him. So yeah, really delving into that was I think important for the story. And for me as an actor to always make it about the other person always brings it, you have to be connected to the other person. Otherwise it's just me, which is just, you can see that on screen when an actor is like, all right, it's my line. And then they're just not listening, To make it about the other person is imperative. And so for Marcus, it's just all about Ginny. And in any scene is what is Ginny doing? How is she feeling? How can I either help, or how am I not helping? Because he doesn't all the time,
And I think you do a really great job in constructing a lot of different layers in how he gradually lets his guard down. It's not that all of a sudden he meets someone, he really likes her, and he feels completely comfortable revealing everything that he hasn't talked to anybody about in his life for a long time. And, that very first scene where they're in school together and he's deflecting with humor is very different to the types of conversations that they have later on. Were you consciously thinking about the way that his guard was gradually coming down and how that would alter their relationship and their dynamic in each of those scenes?
Yeah, totally. And it was an episode by episode thing, and it was based around the circumstances that Deb and Sarah had set up, and what he was going through, and also what Ginny was going through, because she goes through her progression of being an outsider, then becoming quite welcomed by the school, and building up this large network that Marcus isn't a part of and feels quite turbulent around, So there's ups and downs, and there's it's certainly not a linear journey of like, okay, I'm 5 episodes in, I need to strip it 5 episodes back. It's kind of whatever is going on he is going to react to that, I hope, truthfully, But it really is a testament to the writing, because it was all there on the page. He gradually strips it away, and then it becomes, on the day, it becomes about what is he doing physically? How is he feeling? How is Ginny making him feel, and what is he making Ginny feel? It all comes back to that, and just living in those circumstances.
And he definitely seems like someone who's much more comfortable having a really quiet, intimate one-on-one conversation than group settings. How did you think about the difference in the way that he would behave and the way that he would interact with people when he is in that group setting? Because that's kind of the moment where he feels very far outside of his comfort zone, even though on the surface he seems like someone who would really thrive in those situations. Absolutely.
I mean, that's it's just a front. Marcus has 50 different masks and he keeps everyone at arm's length. And that's harder to do when you have 15 people in a room. You can't keep them all going at the same time because you're juggling 15 different plates with 15 different people. So it builds in his anxiety, and that's a part of myself that I can connect with Marcus for sure. I am definitely more comfortable one-on-one or in smaller group settings than larger group settings, and I understand that anxiety around it, and just tried to bring that truthfulness to it. And it's because of his inability to deal with his own feelings and his own emotions that he struggles so much.
And within that, I think it's hugely telling some of the scenes in the show that you would presume he would be in, especially because his twin sister is in a lot of these social settings, but he's not even physically present in that moment. He's off in a room somewhere else, or he's just stayed home by himself. So how did you actually go through the scripts and use the details of the places where he wasn't as part of building him out as well?
That's a great question. It's I sort of piggybacked off the relationship that him and Maxine have and the duplicity of their characters, because Maxine and Marcus are pretty much two sides of the same coin. Maxine is outgoing, outspoken, unapologetically herself, and Marcus is an outsider. He's an introvert. He doesn't really talk. They're twins. So they have it all comes from the same place of needing to be loved and wanting to be loved and not knowing how. They just attack it from different perspectives, you know, and Marcus is pretty reclusive. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely when you're shooting, you don't live the you know, you shoot and then you go home, but in the sense of going, okay, well, they've got a very big party scene today that I'm not going to be there for, and then they've got another thing that I'm not going to be there for. It kind of informs you anyway. You kind of go, okay, well, what's Marcus doing? He's sitting at home smoking a joint, and it's very easy to kind of clue into his reaction to those things because he's not there. He just doesn't want to be there. He can't handle it, and he doesn't want to put himself into a situation where he may feel excluded, like as an outsider, vilified, and because his behavior has been bad in the past. People aren't going to like him. So I think it's a bit of self-preservation there as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's also so great watching the dynamic that you have on screen between Marcus and Maxine as twins. And how did you think about building out that sibling relationship in different ways to other sibling relationships that you've played on screen? Because there is that, you know, that combativeness, but at the same time, they do have that very unique connection being twins with each other as well.
Yeah. I think the way that I think also Sarah tried to attack it is that combativeness comes from the love. It comes from the fact that they have been together since they were born, that they are always at loggerheads because there's always something to kind of, you know, always something to argue about, you know. But it comes from that compassion that you know, you have all these scenes where you discover their father is deaf, and they are such a tight-knit family unit. They're always arguing, but they're always there. They do care. And I think that's a through line throughout the show, is that, yes, they're always calling each other loser. They're always ragging on each other, but they are always there. So that was, I think, hopefully a point of difference that shines through, is that the combativeness, quite like a lot of sibling relationships, it comes from the fact that they love them so much. But they're annoying sometimes, you know?
Right. And there's that really wonderful scene where Maxine comes home completely drunk, and the very first thing that Marcus does is cover for her, make sure she's okay, make sure that she's like safely in bed, and, you know, absolutely everything's all right. And that's his very first instinct with her. You know, and so I wanted to ask particularly about shooting that scene and having that as a real opportunity to explore that sense of just that intrinsic love that you were just talking about that they share with each other.
Well, that was it. That's the scene. Without that scene, you just kind of go, oh, they hate each other, and it's a typical high school, you know, brother and sister archetype. It's that scene where you go, okay, well, they actually do care about each other. They do love each other, and all of this comes from a singular place. So shooting that, it was, I mean, I was super jet lagged when we were shooting that. I'd come from Sydney the day before up to Toronto, but it was I felt like we hit the mark. I really enjoy that scene. Because of the compassion that it shows. It's double-edged. You see the compassion between Marcus and Maxine, and you see them, you know, there's that moment of sweetness, and then it goes back to just having fun and ragging on each other. But you also, for Ginny's perspective, it shows the kind of side of Marcus that she had suspected was there, but had never quite seen it, you know? So it's an important kind of distinction where, although at the end of that scene, Marcus and Ginny both go, yeah, we're going to be friends, we're going to be fine. They both walk away from that going, oh no, I love them, which is it's so much fun. It was fun to bring to life, and hopefully fun to watch.
Yeah. And you were mentioning before a little bit of the overall family dynamic with their parents as well. You know, we only see a few scenes of them all together because the focus of the series is really, you know, very much on Ginny and her circle. But, you know, I was interested in the communication style that you all developed as a family, particularly with the mention of the fact that the father's deaf. And I thought it was interesting that it was a mix of sign language and verbal communication that this family has, which is very realistic, and kind of how everybody landed on what that communication was going to be amongst them, and how much sign language you actually had the opportunity to learn for that.
So Chris is deaf, and his son also helped us learn as much sign as we could. We also had an ASL interpreter on set as well, instructing us. So we all did a bunch of lessons. We were trying to figure out as much as we could. Everyone on set was starting to learn a little bit of sign, but it was just so eye-opening for me, and such an shone a magnifying glass on my privilege, really, because I don't even think about that, and I don't think about how other families communicate and how other families need to communicate. And to be a part of showing that, of representing that on screen, was really quite humbling, and hopefully we did it justice. I loved being a part of it, for that reason, because it shows a different dynamic of families, because there are so many different dynamics, and this was just one of them.
Yeah. And, overall throughout the series with the directors coming in, you had a series of different directors that you were working with, but you had Anya Adams, who directed the first 2 episodes. Yeah. So how did that really help you and the rest of the cast in just really finding your grounding with who these characters were, by having the opportunity to have that steady collaboration over the first 2 episodes that really set the tone for the whole series?
It absolutely did. Anya was the best person for that. She knows what she wants. She gets it done, and there was no discussion about where we're going to set. Those first 2 episodes up are really important, and to have that clear vision through the first 2 episodes certainly put us in really good stead for the rest of the series. I just worked with Anya actually on Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist.
Oh, amazing. I didn't realize that she directed one of your episodes there as well.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's incredible.
Yeah, no, I love the episodes that you're in, and I thought it was such a great juxtaposition to the character of Zoe that you were able to bring in through what you were portraying. Was that a conscious thing on your part, that you were really thinking not just about who this character was, but also the way that he offers this really great outlet for Zoe, and he kind of shows her all the things that she never allows herself to have in life, even if he's a little too extreme with it?
Oh, absolutely. And, as a guest star, that's your job. And so you don't come in as a guest star and go, this is my show, because it's not. You're there to help whoever's journey it is that the film is, or the TV is telling. So that was what was great about it. And it all comes down to that, what I was saying before about putting it on the other person and making it all about whoever your scene partner is going to be, because that's your job, especially as a guest star. So for me, providing that sense of fun for Zoe and for Aidan to kind of lift her out of herself was always the goal and was always the objective. He provides her an alternative way of living that she eventually, comes to realize it isn't necessarily for her, but that's part of grief. That's part of moving on from losing someone is you start to think, well, how can I live life without them? And part of that is exploring new things. Obviously drugs are bad, and obviously all that sort of stuff. And that's what we showed, is that it's not for Zoe. There are people who live like that, and they have a great time. A lot of them are Australian, but it's that was just the crux of those episodes, was to just show Zoe that, or help her come out of herself.
Yeah. And what was the journey of crafting their dynamic? Because the very first moment that you even just look at each other silently on screen, there has to be that intrinsic history that the two of them have together, even though they haven't seen each other for a while. They grew up next door and they have known each other for several years. So how did you go about crafting that?
It was, a lot of it was all in the writing. It was just showing about, when you do connect with someone after such a long time, there's a sense of, wow, so much just changed, so much hasn't changed, and there were a few discussions about that. What sort of level is it? And I think we kind of came to a middle ground where a lot has changed, but there's a familiarity there that allows him to then invite her in and invite her into his world.
Yeah. And you did such a fantastic job with the comedic delivery of that role as well, which, is an art form in of itself, in finding what the specific tone needed to be, because it couldn't ever go so far that it felt like a parody, but also you had to really push into and lean into it as well. So what was the journey of figuring out what that comedic tone that this character was going to bring was going to be?
It was a constant discussion on set. You always come to set with a bunch of ideas, and all ranging from quite grounded to over the top. And you find, and the way I like to work is I like to find that middle ground with the director, with the other actors, what the actual scene is going to be on the day, because other actors bring different ideas and other directors bring other ideas, and it's about what works well together. And you've quite often just got to let stuff go and go, okay, well, that wasn't exactly how I'd planned it, but this is way funnier and this is way better. And I found myself quite often thinking back to my days on Happy Together, because that was my first time really doing just a straight comedy. I'd done Neighbours, which was, that soap opera. You're living in heightened circumstances all the time, always. So if it's funny, it's really funny. If it's dramatic, it's really dramatic. If it's, there's not much, that you try and provide as much light and shade as you can. Whereas, doing Happy Together, it was like, okay, there's a method to this. There is a sense of timing. There is a sense of delivery. There is a sense of maybe you have a funny idea, but it steps on someone else's joke. And you can't have that, because if you step on that joke, then that joke falls flat and the audience is going to hate it for the next scene, and then it's done, So that, working with Alison Turner, who was my on-set sort of dialogue coach, she was really helping me kind of knuckle into that American, because American jokes are also very different to Australian jokes and different to English jokes. They're all different styles of humor. So to have her kind of help me, guide me into that, just put me in great stead to then on Zoe's go, okay, well, what's going to work? What is selfish? What is, just me thinking something's funny and wanting to put it in versus what actually works for the show? That's a very long-winded answer, and I hope I answered it right.
No, it really did. It's a really wonderful answer. And I actually wanted to tap into the fact that you were just mentioning Neighbours, because it's such an amazing opportunity to have this incredible boot camp and really just build up your skill set, particularly with how fast things change in a soap opera, how quickly the scripts come to you, how quickly things can turn around, rewrites coming at you constantly. And even like you were saying, having to think about the heightened reality of what the performance is going to be is very specific. So what do you feel are the skills that you really just had the opportunity to develop in your time working on that show, that then when you go on to something like Zoe's Playlist or Ginny and Georgia, you find yourself actually really thinking about or realizing subconsciously that it's coming into play in your performance?
Yeah, I mean, all of them. I wasn't an actor before Neighbours, so that's just really, I jumped in the deep end and I really tried to soak up as much as I can. When you're on set on Neighbours, you're working on so many episodes at once. So you don't really have time to make mistakes. You don't have time to think about things on the day, because you're already, you're doing this scene and then you got to go to the next one and then you got to know the next one and then you got to go to the next one, and you have time for a wide and you have time to then cut in and do other things, but you got to be on point. Otherwise, whatever goes in is going to go out. So it was a real lesson in learning on-set technical stuff of hitting your mark, being there for lighting, looking out for other people, communicating with your crew. It's so important that you communicate with people. And then from an acting perspective, to listen, to be grounded, to make choices, whether or not the choice that you make before you go to set is going to be the one that you do on the day. If you come with a choice and you come with an idea, you can then work with the director. You can't just go on set and go, well, I don't know, what am I doing? And so those were really the lessons, the biggest lessons that I learned, and overall work ethic. Just you're hired to do a job, and you have to serve that job. You can't go in and just be all about you, because especially if you've got a cast of 30 or 25 or however many they've cast at the moment, there's no room for that. If you have 25 people trying to make it all about them, it doesn't work. So it's really about serving the story and serving what is right for not just your character, but for the project as a whole. That was really what I tried to bring in for every role since, and it kind of was a trial by fire, because after doing that and shooting so quickly and being used to being on top of 18 episodes at one time and keeping a continuity Bible, that is a big thing, of making sure you know where you're going, where you've been, all of those things, so that when you come to set you go, right, okay, I know exactly what's going on, because we don't shoot it in order. All of those things I really try to bring in to just my work ethic in general.
Yeah. And jumping back to Zoe's, I thought there was a great way that you described the experience in that it really challenged you, but it didn't fully push you outside of your comfort zone. Which is really wonderful. And so I was interested in particularly with a lot of the musical scenes that you had to do in your episodes, how that was really the case, given that, you know, you have a musical background that you were able to then channel in a completely different way with the show. And also just the safety net that you had with the collaborators that you're working with. You know, you've got Austin Winsberg running the show. You've got Mandy Moore really working with you on how to tell a story and really hone in character through those musical performances. So how did it balance out with the aspects that challenged you, but also the safety nets that you had with those creative teams around you?
Well, that really was it. I have a musical background and I love music. I've been playing music forever, but not on TV, and not certainly not in such a broadcasted capacity. And that watching the show before I came on, it's polished. Everyone is on point. Everyone completely bodies their performances. It's amazing. So to see that and to go, okay, well, I have a responsibility here to really try and work on the things that I'm not comfortable with and the things that I know I have a block with, which was, you know, singing is not my strong suit. I'm not a classically trained musical theatre singer. I sing punk stuff sometimes. So going into that, I really, as soon as I had the songs, I really tried to work as much as I could with Charlie Alterman, who is the vocal coach, and he's amazing. He looks at where your voice is and we work from there. He never tries to push you into somewhere that is going to make you sound bad, because you have to work with what you've got. So he was really, really wonderful. And starting from that, because vocals are the things that make me most anxious, was knowing that I had Charlie in my corner just kind of pushed everything else into a really safe space. I knew that Mandy was there to help me with the dancing, which also is not my strong suit. So really, it was so much fun to get to explore that and get to explore this different side of things, because I've never done musicals. I've never done any of those things. And being pushed into that arena with such amazing creatives behind me was a privilege. I was so thankful and so lucky that they were there.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the amazing work on both of these shows, and thank you so much for such a lovely conversation this afternoon.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.